Good evening. Welcome to day 17 of Reading Challenge. Chapter 32. The first person to meet Anna at home was her son. He dashed down the stairs to her, in spite of the governor's call, and with a desperate joy shrieked, "Mother, mother," running up to her. He hung on her neck. "I told you it was mother," he shouted to the governess. "I knew." And her son, like her husband, aroused in Anna a feeling akin to disappointment. She had imagined him better than he was in reality. She had to let herself drop down to the reality to enjoy him as he really was. But even as he was charming with his fair curls, his blue eyes, and his plump, graceful little legs in tightly pulled up stockings. Anna experienced almost physical pleasure in the sensation of his nearness and his caresses and moral soothing. When she met his simple, confiding and loving glance and heard his naive questions, Anna took out the presents Dolly's children had sent him and told her son what sort of little girl was Tanya at Moscow and how Tanya could read and even taught the other children. "Why am I not so nice as she?" asked Serioza. "To me, you are nicer than anyone in the world." "I know that," said Serioza, smiling. Anna had not had time to drink her coffee when the Countess Lydia Ivanovna was announced. The Countess Lydia Ivanovna was a tall, stout woman with an unhealthily sallow face and splendid pensive black eyes. Anna liked her, but today she seemed to be seeing her for the first time with all her defects. "Well, my dear, so you took the olive branch?" inquired Countess Lydia Ivanovna as soon as she came into the room. "Yes, it's all over, but it was all much less serious than we supposed," answered Anna. "My bellezure is in general too hasty." But Countess Lydia Ivanovna, though she was interested in everything that did not concern her, had a habit of never listening to what interested her. She interrupted Anna. "Yes, there's a plenty of sorrow and evil in the world. I am so worried today." "Oh, why?" asked Anna, trying to suppress a smile. "I am beginning to weary of fruitlessly championing the truth, and sometimes I am quite unhinged by it. The Society of the Little Sisters," this was a religiously patriotic philanthropic institution, "was going splendidly, but with this gentleman it's impossible to do anything," added Countess Lydia Ivanovna in a tone of ironic submission to destiny. "They pounce on the idea and distort it, and then work it out so prettily and unworthily. Two or three people, your husband among them, understand all the importance of the thing, but the others simply drag it down. Yesterday, Pravdin wrote to me. Pravdin was a well-known panslavist abroad, and Countess Lydia Ivanovna described the purport of his letter. Then the Countess told her of more disagreement and intrigues against the work of the unification of the churches and departed in haste, as she had that day to be at the meeting of some society and also at the Slavonic committee. It was all the same before, of course, but why was it I didn't notice it before? Anna asked herself, or has she been very much irritated today? It's really ludicrous. Her object is doing good. She a Christian, yet she's always angry, and she always has enemies and always enemies in the name of Christianity and doing good. After Countess Lydia Ivanovna, another friend came, the wife of a chief secretary who told her all the news of the town. At 3 o'clock, she too went away, promising to come to dinner. Alexei Alexandrovich was at the ministry. Anna, left alone, spent the time till dinner in assisting at her son's dinner. He dined apart from his parents, and in putting her things in order, and in reading and answering the notes and letters which he had accumulated on her table. The feeling of causeless shame which she had felt on the journey and her excitement too had completely vanished in the habitual condition of her life. She felt again resolute and irreproachable. She called with wonder her state of mind on the previous day. "What was it?" "Nothing." Vronsky said something silly, which it was easy to put a stop to, and I answered as I ought to have done. To speak of it to my husband would be unnecessary and out of the question. To speak of it would be to attach importance to what has no importance. She remembered how she had told her husband of what was almost a declaration made her at Petersburg by a young man, one of her husband's subordinates, and how Alexei Alexandrovich had answered that every woman living in the world was exposed to such incidents, but that he had the fullest confidence in her tact and could never lower her and himself by jealousy. So then there's no reason to speak of it. And indeed, thank God there's nothing to speak of, she told her herself. Chapter 33. Alexei Alexandrovich came back from the meeting of the ministers at 4 o'clock, but as often happened, he had not time to come into her. He went into his study to see the people waiting for him with petitions, and to sign some papers brought him by his chief secretary. At dinner time, there was always a few people dining with the Karenins. There arrived an old lady, a cousin of Alexei Alexandrovich, the chief secretary of the department, and his wife, and a young man who had been recommended to Alexei Alexandrovich for the service. Anna went into the drawing room to receive these guests. Precisely at 5 o'clock, before the bronze Peter the first clock had struck the fifth stroke, Alexei Alexandrovich came in wearing a white tie and evening coat with two stars, as he had to go out directly after dinner. Every minute of Alexei Alexandrovich's life was portioned out and occupied, and to make time to get through all that lay before him every day, he adhered to the strict punctuality. Unhasting and unresting was his motto. He came into the dining hall, greeted everyone, and hurriedly sat down, smiling to his wife. Yes, my solitude is over. You wouldn't believe how uncomfortable. He laid stress on the word uncomfortable. It is to dine alone. At dinner, he talked a little to his wife about Moscow matters and with a sarcastic smile asked her after Stephen Arkadovich. But the conversation was for the most part general, dealing with Petersburg, official and public news. After dinner, he spent half an hour with his guest, and again with a smile pressed his wife's hand, withdrew, and drove off to the council. Anna did not go out that evening either to the Princess Betsky Verskaya, who bearing of her return had invited her, nor to the theatre, where she had a box for that evening. She did not go out principally because the she had reckoned upon was not ready. Altogether, Anna, on turning after the departure of her guest to the consideration of her attire, was very much annoyed. She was generally a mistress of her art of dressing well without great expense, and before leaving Moscow, she had given her dressmaker three dresses to transform. The dresses had to be altered so that they could not be recognized, and they ought to have been ready 3 days before. It appeared that two dresses had not been done at all, while the other one had not been altered as Anna had intended. The dressmakers came to explain, declaring that it would be better as she had done it, and Anna was so furious that she felt ashamed when she thought of it afterwards. To regain her serenity completely, she went into the nursery and spent the whole evening with her son, put him to bed herself, signed him with a cross, and tucked him up. She was glad she had not gone out anywhere, and had spent the evening so well. She felt so light-hearted and serene. She saw so clearly that all that had seemed to her so important on her railway journey was only one of the common trivial incidents of fashionable life, and that she had no reason to feel ashamed before anyone else or before herself. Anna sat down at the hearth with an English novel and waited for her husband. Exactly at 9:30 she heard his ring, and he came into the room. Here you are at last, she observed, holding out her hand at him. He kissed her hand and sat down beside her. Altogether then, I see your visit was a success, he said to her. Oh yes, she said, and she began telling him about everything from beginning. Her journey with the Countess Voronskaya, her arrival, the accident at the station. Then she described the pity she had felt first of her brother and afterwards for Dolly. I imagine one cannot exonerate such a man from blame, though he is your brother, said Alexei Alexandrovich severely. Anna smiled. She knew that he said that simply to show that family considerations could not prevent him from expressing his genuine opinion. She knew that characteristic in her husband and liked it. I'm glad it all I'm glad it has all ended so satisfactorily and that you are back again, he went on. Come, what do they say about the new act I have got passed in the council? Anna had heard nothing of this act, and she felt conscience stricken at having been able so readily to forget what was to him of such importance. Here, on the other hand, it has made a great sensation, he said with a complacent smile. She saw that Alexei Alexandrovich wanted to tell her something pleasant to him about it, and she brought him by questions to tell it. With the same complacent smile, he told her of the ovation he had received in consequence of the act he had passed. I was very, very glad. It shows that at last a reasonable and steady view of the matter is becoming prevalent among us. Having drunk his second cup of tea with cream and bread, Alexei Alexandrovich got up and was going towards his study. And you have not been anywhere this evening. You have been dull, I expect, he said. Oh no, she answered, getting up after him and accompanying him across the room to his study. What are you reading now? She asked. Just now I am reading Duck de Lily. He answered, a very remarkable He answered, a very remarkable book. Anna smiled, as people smile at the weakness of those they love, and putting her hand under his, she escorted him to the door of the study. She knew his habit that had grown into necessity of reading in the evening. She knew too that in spite of his official duties which swallowed up almost the whole of his time, he considered it his duty to keep up with everything of note that appeared in the intellectual world. She knew too that he was really interested in books dealing with politics, philosophy, and theology, that art was utterly foreign to his nature. But in spite of this, or rather, in consequence of it, Alexei Alexandrovich never passed over anything in the world of art, but made it his duty to read everything. She knew that in politics, in philosophy, in theology, Alexei Alexandrovich often had doubts and made investigations, but on questions of art and poetry, and above all of music, of which he was totally devoid of understanding, he had the most distinct and decided opinions. He was fond of talking about Shakespeare, Raphael, Beethoven, of the significance of new schools of poetry and music, all of which were classified by him with very conspicuous consistency. Well, God be with you, she said at the door of the study, where a shaded candle and a descender of water were already put by his armchair, and I will ride to Moscow. He pressed her hand and again kissed it. All the same, he is a good man. All the same, he is a good man, truthful, good hearted, and remarkable in his own line. Anna said to herself, going back to her room, as though she were defending him to someone who had attacked him, and said that no, and said that one could not love him. But why is it his ears stick out so strangely? Or has he had his hair cut? Precisely at 12 o'clock, when Anna was still sitting at her writing table finishing a letter to Dolly, she heard the sound of measured steps in slippers, and Alexei Alexandrovich, freshly washed out, combed with a book under his arm, came into her. It's time, said he with a meaning smile, and he went into their bedroom. And what right had he to look at him like that? Thought Anna, recalling Vronsky's glance at Alexei Alexandrovich. Undressing, she went into the bedroom, but her face had none of the eagerness which during her stay in Moscow had fairly flashed from her eyes and her smile. On the contrary, now the fire seemed quenched in her, hidden somewhere far away. Thanks for the day. We'll see tomorrow.